The mutants of the exclusion zone. While they pose a serious threat to the stalker population, sometimes these creatures also fight between themselves. Hello stalkers and welcome to the Anomalous Dugout. In this video we will take a look at mutants' affiliations, that is, which species of mutants are friends and which are enemies. In order to find out the types of monsters that are hostile to each other, I ran a series of tests by spawning different mutants and observing the results. Unfortunately, I was not able to find a good spot to test the poltergeists, because they always move around and escape. This makes it quite difficult to see if they are fighting with other creatures. So poltergeists won't be featured in this video, since I couldn't get accurate results on their affiliations. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, let's start with Shadow of Chernobyl. The three types of dogs, which are the blind dog, the pseudo-dog, and the psy-dog, not only are friendly towards each other, but also share the same affiliations with other mutants. They are neutral with rodents, snorks, bloodsuckers, and controllers. And they are enemies with boars, fleshes, and pseudo-giants. Then we have the boar and the flesh, who are friendly with each other and also share the same affiliations. As we saw already, they are enemies with all kinds of dogs, but also with bloodsuckers and pseudo-giants. They are neutral with everything else, that is, rodents, snorks, and controllers. Moving on to the rodent, it is a unique case because the rodent is simply neutral with all the other mutant species in the game. Then we have the bloodsucker, which is also neutral with everybody except for boars and fleshes. The snork is quite friendly as well, because its only enemy is the controller, and for the controller it is the other way around. Its only enemy is the snork. Finally, we have the pseudo-giant, and as we saw already, it is enemy with dogs, boars, and fleshes, and it is neutral to rodents and all the humanoid mutants. To recap all of that, here's a table I made. Green means the creatures are neutral, and red means they are enemies. Surprisingly, there are not that many mutant species that are hostile to each other. However, it is likely that the developers forgot to implement some of the mutants' behavior, or at least they decided to change them in the other games. Speaking of which, let's now take a look at Clear-Sky. Well, it appears that something really strange is happening in this game. Or rather, nothing is happening. Indeed, all the different species of mutants seem to be neutral towards each other. As you can see, I spawned all of them in one place, and it's peaceful. I am not sure why the developers made it like that, but my guess is that it was an easy way to make the mutants a united force against the stalkers. In Clear-Sky, mutants are almost treated like a faction of their own. In fact, you can see mutant groups marked on your PDA map, much like squads from human factions. The strongest example of this is the situation of Duty in the Agroprom. They were literally at war with the mutants coming from the underground, who dug up tunnels towards the surface, with the goal of swarming the stalkers. It was even suggested that these mutants were controlled, or at least given the task to attack humans. In any case, making all the mutants neutral with each other was a way to increase their efficiency against stalkers, because they would not bother to fight between themselves and thus focus on humans instead. But maybe the real reason is something else. I'm not totally sure. Anyway, all of that changed once again in Call of Pripyat, where affiliations of mutants were implemented back and modified compared to Shadow of Chernobyl. Also, the Burer and the Chimera were added to the mutant roster. Once again, the three types of dogs are friendly towards each other, and share the same affiliations with other mutants. Just like in Shadow of Chernobyl, they are hostile with boars, fleshes, and pseudo-giants, but now also with bloodsuckers, snorks, and burers. They are neutral with rodents, controllers, and chimeras. The boar and the flesh are still friends, but they don't share the exact same affiliations anymore. They both are enemies of the dogs, the rodents, the bloodsuckers, the snorks, and the chimeras. However, the boar is also hostile towards pseudo-giants and burers, while the flesh isn't. Apart from that, they are both neutral with the controllers. Moving on to the rodent, who was cool with everyone in Shadow of Chernobyl, but now gained a few enemies, which are the boars, the fleshes, and the pseudo-giants. Then we have the bloodsucker, who is hostile to almost everyone else, all kinds of dogs, boars, fleshes, snorks, controllers, pseudo-giants, and burers. The bloodsucker is only neutral with the rodents and the chimeras. Now is the turn of the snork, who also has a lot of enemies: dogs, boars, fleshes, bloodsuckers, controllers, and chimeras. It is however neutral with the rodents, the pseudo-giants, and the burers. Much like in Shadow of Chernobyl, the controller has few enemies, who are now bloodsuckers, snorks, and chimeras. The pseudo-giant has a little bit more hostility towards dogs, boars, rodents, bloodsuckers, and chimeras. Yet the pseudo-giant is neutral with a fair number of species as well: fleshes, snorks, controllers, and burers. Speaking of burers, their only enemies are dogs, boars, bloodsuckers, and chimeras. And to finish with the chimera, of course, it is a real predator, since it will hunt almost everyone else: boars, fleshes, snorks, controllers, pseudo-giants, and burers. The chimera is only neutral with dogs, rodents, and bloodsuckers. And there you have it, in a recap in a table. Just to remind you, this was the affiliations in Shadow of Chernobyl, and now in Call of Pripyat. As you can see, there are much more hostile species, but it makes for interesting encounters. Besides, since Call of Pripyat is the last and probably most refined game out of the three, it is likely that these affiliations of mutants are the most canonical ones, in other words, the ones that the developers wanted. But who knows, perhaps all of this will change in S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2. In any case, there is one last thing I wanted to test out, which was the relations between mutants, zombified stalkers, and the Monolith faction. The results were the same in all three games. Every species of mutants are neutral towards zombified stalkers, but they are all hostile towards Monolithians. Meanwhile, zombified stalkers and Monolithians are neutral between each other. Honestly, there are different ways to interpret this, and I don't want to dive too deep into theories because it's not the subject of this video, but my guess is that mutants don't see zombies as humans because their brains were fried to a large extent. But they do attack Monolithians because their mind control is much more subtle. On the other hand, zombies and Monolithians don't shoot each other because they share the trait of being under the influence of Affiliations. Well, this video was very interesting to make, so I hope you'll find the results interesting as well. Make sure to write your interpretations of the mutant affiliations in the comments below. And until next time, thank you for watching, stalkers, and goodbye.